Welcome to Walking in Spirit and Truth. I am Sandi Craig, one of your hosts for this evening.
And I'm John Craig, and here we are. We're ready to get going, huh?
We are so glad that you've joined us this evening for Walking in Spirit and Truth, and we're going to continue in our study of Psalm 23, and we're specifically going to look at verse 2 today. We're going to discover some amazing things because we're going to look at it from in two different directions. First, we are going to break down some of the Hebrew and some of the meaning, and maybe even look at the meaning of what others may think it is. But then we're going to go to the Paleo Hebrew and discover what it's saying in that way, because I'm going to tell you there's some great meanings there. And if you're just following the tradition of old, you might not discover or understand to completeness what that might mean, even though I'm sure there's more we can learn from it even now. So, well, let's go ahead and turn to Psalm 23, and we're going to read.
See, I'm reading from the King James Version this evening. It says, a psalm of David. Yahweh is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me into the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy shield, they comfort me. Thou prepares a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of Yahweh forever.
Those words sound so familiar to us, but I want us to take it and look at it. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. Okay, before we truly examine this, I want us to have a little bit of understanding about sheep. David was a shepherd, and in this psalm, we sort of see that position of sheep, right? So, what is it about sheep that we need to understand? Well, to start with, sheep are really very jealous animals. When they actually see another sheep who's in a nice big green patch of grass or pasture, guess what they're going to do? They want it for themselves. They'll go over and butt the other sheep till they can take it over and have it for themselves. And when they see another sheep who's found a nice, quiet little shady spot under a tree or some brush for rest, they'll go butt them and try to get them out so they can have their place. Think about that, because we as people do that too. We're always positioning ourselves to have the good land, the better land. In fact, that's why wars are fought and everything else. And oftentimes we butt one another out of the way so that we can take over that position. I'm not saying if we're walking in the Spirit, that's what we do, but that is what the world does. In fact, if you think about kids younger kids, preschool age, toddler age, and they may be uninterested in a toy, but when somebody else has that toy, what happens? That child probably wants that toy as well. In fact, it's sort of that way even with grown-ups as well. Let's say that somebody doesn't want this specific girlfriend. And then they see another guy with that girl, then all of a sudden they want them. And it goes that way with girls too. I'm just telling you, we do the same thing. Maybe there's a reason that we've been compared to sheep. Do you think?
Well, I think that's why we get the term sheeple, and where people are just willing to follow. Honestly, it's actually, I think, thinking about it, we get the term sheeple, and that basically is that like sheep, they're just going to follow the voice of the shepherd where they want to go. But sheeple gives an implication that sheep are so dumb they're not paying attention, and they are just going to go wherever they're being led, or where the crowd of sheep is going, and something like that. But honestly, it's almost more like goats, because sheep know the voice of their shepherd, and so therefore, what's up with that? That what they know the voice of their shepherd. So if they're following the good shepherd, they're not just going to go anywhere. They're only going to go where they need to be going, where it's safe. So, but we get that idiom talking about the people in in the world as we see current events take place. Like, why are people doing that? Why is everybody in lockstep together with what's happening? And that just gives you a picture of kind of how sheep operate too.
Well, it does. And here's something that's good is that when the shepherd shows up, the sheep tend to chill and forget their rivalries. They forget their positioning and they sort of go in lockstep when the shepherd's around. And it's good because the shepherd knows what we need. The sheep don't really ever know what they need. The sheep might think they know what they want and what they need, but only the shepherd truly knows what they need. And we need to always remember that. Now, here's another thing we need to look at. When it says to lie down in green pastures, is a sheep going to know where the good green pastures are? No, they're not. Only the
Not by
shepherd.
themselves. No.
No, only the shepherd knows how to take his sheep to a place of green pastures and how to make his sheep rest. He faithfully guides the sheep to the green pastures. Now, there's a book by Philip Keller. Shepherd looks at Psalm 23, and his name is W. Philip Keller, and he writes some really thought-provoking things because he said that sheep don't actually even ever easily lie down, and they won't even lie down unless four conditions are met. Now, when we hear something like that, we need to stop and we need to ponder these things as well, because possibly it applies to us as people as too, and at least in some aspects, if not all aspects, because it is almost impossible for a sheep to lie down unless these four requirements are met. The first one is because they are timid, they're not going to lie down if they are afraid. They have to be free from all fear in order to rest. Secondly, because they're social animals, they're not going to lie down if there's friction among the other sheep. If there's positioning and headbutting and threats and this sheep has better than me, I'm serious, they're not going to find rest if that's going on as well. So there's two things. Now, the third one is if there's things that torment, like parasites and pests and flies, they won't lie down. They can only relax when they're free of pests. And then finally, if sheep are hungry, if they think they need to be searching for food because there's hunger, if they're anxious about it, then they're not going to rest. Rest comes because the shepherd has dealt with these four things. He's dealt with the fear. He's dealt with the friction. He's dealt with the flies and the tormentors, and he's dealt with the famine. Now, when you hear those things, I want you to think about your life. How well do we rest if we're fearful? If there's conflict in the family, and I'm not just meaning your home, I'm talking about in your congregation or even outside our doors. How well will we rest? How well will we rest when the tormentor is messing with our heads, speaking thoughts that we haven't taken captive, messing with our dreams, our vision? How well do we rest? And then when we are hungry, and I'm not just talking physically hungry, but spiritually hungry as well, how well do we rest? I think each and every one of those things applies to us as people as well. And unless you study that, you never understand that it's going to take a great act for the sheep to rest. And the shepherd brings that forth to truly rest, not to always be standing and waiting. In fact, a sheep will always stand. It will stand unless it knows that everything is taken care of. It will not lie down at all. It stands there because it feels like it has to be on the ready for whatever's coming its way. I think that very much applies to us as people as well, because we also need those things.
So I do have some thoughts about that, because I think about, in these past two Torah portions, we're going through the plagues of Egypt, and all of it you can actually see is for the preparation for this week's Torah portion, where the people depart from Egypt and they head towards the Red Sea, and we see all of that take place. And what are the people? The people are very. If you think about it, if they went through the 10 plagues and they saw the 10 plagues happening, do you think there was a lot of just peace in the homes of those Hebrew people when they see, because these are world catastrophic events that are taking place that cannot be explained away other than these are the hand of God. And so if you really look at it now, what when we look at the events of the world that's going on right now, and we're aware of what's happening, are people settled? Are they
No.
settled into where are they? I mean, are they just at peace and everything's good and hunky dory, and or are people just unsettled in so many different ways? They just know something went. Is there another hammer that's about to fall? And a lot of it right now we can see is manipulated by governments. Are people in our community? Are they settled about that? Are they think that's just fine? Or are we just anxious? Are we kind of always just is our heart unsettled? And Yeshua tells us, don't let your heart be troubled. And yet here we are in a very troubling time. But what happens when the hand of God begins to move and we begin to see the plagues that the signs and the wonders that happened at Egypt begin to happen in our time, which are the signs and wonders that are discussed in the book of Revelation.
Yes.
These are all to get the sheep ready to move.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a time that we're not supposed to be laying down, and yet we see in the move in this week's Torah portion where people are taken to the waters of Meribah, the bitter waters. But what are they supposed to do? It's an oasis where you're supposed to relax, sit down, get some water, and it takes the hand of God to allow them to be able to have the bitter water turn to sweet. And the same thing with the food is they are upset until the water and the food is taken care of. We're just the same way. And we
Exactly.
know these things are taking place, and we know these things are about to take place. And therefore we got to understand what a greater time that we need to be looking at our shepherd that is fully trustworthy.
Well, don't you think that's why Psalm 23 at this day and this hour needs to go right along Psalm 91? We need to understand them and rest in them because they're promises for this day and this hour.
Mm-hmm.
Because a flock of sheep that is restless, that is discontented, that is always agitated and disturbed, it never does well. It does not flourish. A people that are following a different leader, a different shepherd, are going to always be facing fear. They're always going to be facing tormentors. They're always going to be facing hunger and famine. They're always going to be in conflict with one another when we're following a different shepherd. And there are bad shepherds out there. There are bad physical shepherds out there that neglect their flock, and their flock does not flourish. In fact, they die. Any little thing can actually scare sheep. In fact, a jackrabbit that darts quickly can quickly scare sheep. And you know what happens to the sheep if they're lambing, if they're about to bear children? They'll abort their children if they're scared, if they're afraid. And that can be devastating to a shepherd if you don't understand what's happening. That is why the flock had to be constantly tended to, because sheep are always calm in the presence of their shepherd. There is shalom for them. But when the shepherd's not around, any little thing can scare them. And you can have 400 sheep walk off a cliff. That's happened in the last so many years as well. 400 sheep, because one sheep ran off, the others just followed and all met their death. Sheep are easily scared. They need a shepherd to tend them, or they will not survive. And so thus their livelihood and how they prosper all depends on the diligence of the shepherd, on the diligence of the owner, whether or not his flock is free of disturbing influences or facing constant conflict and devastation within their numbers. And it's the same with us. Which shepherd are we following? I want to move down a little bit further and break down some words. I want to look at dashah, which is the word for green. And we look at it and we think green grass, but it's not actually the picture that word is supposed to bring forth, because it refers to the first shoots of vegetation from the earth, that young tender grass, that young herbage, just as it clothes the meadows, and it's this delicate sweet food for the cattle. And it differs from the grass that you mow, which is expressed by a different Hebrew word, hatzer. Sheep actually need water, they need food, they need care, they need attention. All of those things are important. The same thing that's important for us. Dashah, the green pasture, the green grass. I think we're going to go ahead and just look at the paleo of this phrase real quick. If we're looking at the green in paleo, the dashah, it is spelled with a dalet, which is a door, a sheen, which is the teeth, or which means to consume or to crush or to press, to destroy, and the aleph, which is strength or leader or Yah the Father. When you look at that put together, what do you think? Well, there's a door, and there's consuming or crushing, and there's strength. What does that mean? Destroy, produce. Now remember, to bring forth life, often something has to die. Always remember that a seed must die to bring forth life, and that's part of the production cycle. So it looks like something must be destroyed so something else can be produced. So the door that produces strength brings forth life. Okay, that door that produces or consumes in order to bring forth something new, it brings forth life. It's life-giving, the door that gives life. That's really what you see with this word green. It's not enough to have the protection of the family. Okay, that's not enough. You have to have a family that brings forth generations, that brings forth life, that continues, or there's always an end. There's an end. If you're not bringing forth life, then your generations end, they cease. So if you look at what Yah has done in the past in Abraham's covenant, Abraham's covenant produces life. And what did Yeshua said? He said, I have come to bring forth life and that more abundantly. I have come for the living. I've come to bring forth life. The food the shepherd provides then is always full of what? Life. That food the shepherd brings is always full of life, but it only comes through a covenant relationship when you follow Yah's instructions, when you follow his commands. And we see that right here in these green pastures. This dashah, this food that brings forth life. As something's destroyed, something else lives. Now that's just looking at the paleo, but let's look at he makes me lie down. Now, why are we looking at it this way? Because actually in the Hebrew, in pastures green or in green pastures, he makes me lie down. That's actually how it is. We turn it around in English to fit the way we speak, but it actually has that green pastures, that satisfaction comes first. So now I want you to remember how a sheep lies down and when it lies down. Now, it is actually one word for he makes me lie down, yar-bitzeni. And this word is hyphenated, and we're going to break it apart a little bit to see how it's constructed, because he makes me lie down is what it is, yar-bitzeni. And it's spelled with a yod, a resh, an aleph, and then a yod, zadik nun, and yod. And the root is rabatz, which means a place to lie down. To make lie down is the verb. It's this idea of lying down. Why do you lie down? Let me ask that question. When you lay down, what's the reason?
If I lay down, it means I'm going to sleep.
But what are you doing in the midst of that?
I'm resting.
The purpose of lying down is what? To work?
No.
It's to rest. When do we rest?
When we,
Shabbat is the
right?
guarantee of our rest that makes all the other 6 days work. It's that day of rest, that day that was given to us immediately after man was created, that day of rest. Okay, so if Shabbat is the day of rest, it shows us that when we look at the way this is spelled, it's spelled that with that idea that chaos is, which is work followed by work, followed by work, followed by work, followed by work. Have you ever experienced that?
That's
Where
kind
you
of
work and you work and you work and you work with no rest.
yeah, absolutely. In fact, yeah, before we started keeping Shabbat years and years and years ago, we just went 7 days a week.
Yeah, I will say this, to carry forth a congregation was much more weighty. I'm not saying the work was harder, or it just seemed all consuming, although it still is very much that as well, but there was no rest in there. Before we kept Shabbat, we might have been doing everything else, even studying the Hebrew and doing things, but before we actually started keeping Sabbath, it was work, work, work. It was like chaos around in our lives, in that your wheels are spinning all the time. You never get a break. And I remember it was exhausting. I think that's probably one of the best words to describe it.
Sure.
And so what we have here is Yah's solution is incorporated within this psalm. So why does God bring you to the place where you belong, bring you to the green pastures? It's to rest. When we think of green pastures, we don't think that it's Shabbat. I want to ask you this. Do sheep eat lying down?
No, I don't
No.
think so.
No, they don't. If they're going to eat, they're going to be standing. So he makes me lie down in green pastures. If it was about consuming the grass, maybe it would have different words, because he makes me lie down in green pastures. That means that there's a lying down when there's complete satisfaction. Remember, all those things that they could fear, all those obstacles have been removed. So there is satisfaction and the sheep can rest. God shepherds you, God shepherds me. And the first thing he does is he takes us to the green pastures where we lie down because we've been satisfied. So after we've been satisfied, we say it's the blessing. In fact, that is why the blessing is supposed to come after we eat, because we're not thanking God we're not blessing the meal. We're thanking God for his provision, because he satisfied us. So you look at this phrase, in green pastures, he makes me lie down. In that satisfaction, he makes me lie down. So in the place where we belong is the place where we're nourished, because so many of us are spinning our wheels still without that Sabbath rest, without Shabbat, that our life is just consumed by work, and it creates this sort of chaos. There's this repetition of work interlaced with the person of the streak. We need life. And where does that life come from? That life comes from Yeshua. That life and that cycle stops because of the green pastures of Shabbat, of Sabbath. So this verse is about Shabbat when you look at it in this way, that meaning of Shabbat, that rest occurs after we've already seen his great provision in our lives. Just as David said, when he said Yod He Vav He, he's seen what he already did, and he's confident that he knows he's going to take care of him no matter what is ahead of him. And it goes back to the message that we need to have as well. Should we be confident and be able to rest because the fear and the provision and the conflict and the torment and our hunger have all been satisfied? Absolutely. He makes us lie down in green pastures, that place of rest, that Shabbat, because rest is something we need. How do you know that you're in a green pasture? Because you're satisfied. So when we realize that Yah is shepherding us, and we're open to the fact that he leads us to green pastures where we rest and where we're satisfied, then we have understanding here of what this is about. This is a Shabbat scripture. In one of the layers, at least. I'm not saying the other part has nothing to do with it. I'm not saying that. But there is a deeper meaning about Shabbat right here in this psalm, and most of us miss it. How much of the rest that we have in our lives is the result because we really believe that God has satisfied us? Do we really believe that God has satisfied us? It's a question we all need to ask ourselves, because what is he doing for us? He is leading us into those green pastures. He makes me lie down in green pastures. Or in green pastures, he makes me lie down. I'm going to go ahead and look at the paleo, and then we're going to go, since I'm already here, it's not what I planned, but I want us to continue with this vein, and then we'll go back and continue looking at it from a different angle. But if we're looking here at the paleo, this same sentence structure follows in the next part of the verse, okay?
So he leads me beside the still waters.
Okay, so if that same sentence structure is here in this, it's going to be beside waters calm or water still, he leads me. That's actually how it's written when you look at the Hebrew. And beside waters is al-mei, Ealmei. Okay, and that's spelled with an ayin, a lamed, a mem, and a yod. Okay, ayin. What do we look at? To see, to experience, to know. That lamed is about control, and it's about the shepherd's staff. And the mem can be waters and chaos and womb. And the yod is about doing your deeds, your work. So let's look at it from this way. Experience, know, control, chaos, work. Those are just briefly what those letters mean. To know or experience, so that's the ayin. The lamed is the control. The waters can be that chaos, and the yod is to work or to perform, to do a deed. So experience or know, control, chaos, and work. So here we have these waters that he leads us beside are to do what? They're to control the chaos, not choppy waters. He's taking us to a place where we experience that control over chaos. We don't do it. We do not have the ability to control the chaos. He is the only one that can do it. He's the only one. We are able to rest because we know we're not going to be attacked during our rest. We can put aside the week's work and trust him that he's got us and sit there and honor his word. And how do we do that? We keep Sabbath. We keep that Shabbat. We rest when he's called us to rest. And then that rest, in that the rest of the 6 days we work, this day, the seventh day we rest, we should not sit and worry about how we're going to pay the bills or what money we're going to make or how is this going to be satisfied? No, we should trust him and rest because he's the one that's given it to us so that all the other days are blessed. Without that, then we are falling under somebody else's authority when we don't honor that Shabbat. The chaos exists all around us.
Just thinking about the calm waters. By the way, I would say this about calm waters: it's the best water skiing water. So smooth and glassy. That's where you want to be because it's not hard on the body. I don't know. There you go. There's my analogy that goes with it. It's the best water, and it's the best water is the first thing in the morning when there's no wind.
Yeah, I've heard you tell me that before.
Yeah.
Not that we actually do that, but you've told me it. You look at the waters, you tell me that.
In my
Manuka.
growing up years, that's what we did.
Manuka, still waters. So it's spelled with a mem, a nun, a het, a vav, and a tav. So here with those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 letters, we have chaos, life, separate, secure, and covenant. What does that mean if we put it together? The chaos of life separated from us, and we're secured by the covenant, the still waters. Have you ever pictured the still waters like that? The chaos of life is separated from us, and we're secured because we're in that covenant with him. Those are still waters. That's assuring that the chaos to be removed and separated, a dividing line brought forth so that we can rest. Still waters without chaos and life, separated by what? The covenant. We're secure in that covenant. When we are following him, we're secure in our covenant. And that's where life springs from. There's no longer that chaos, but it's now waters of life. And when the waters of life, to me, it changes into that womb, into that life-giving water, because we're following his word and we're secured in the covenant. And because we're following him, those things, that chaos has been removed, and it turns into something that brings forth life, that womb.
That really brings that picture of Israel coming to the edge of the Red Sea there. And you see the wall that gets placed between the Hebrews and the Egyptians, and it's like a force field. The Egyptians cannot pass through that wall. They cannot get close to it. But what's on the other side? You have tumultuous waters. You have the Red Sea. They're not going anywhere until Yahweh parts those waters. And what was chaos for them, they're able to travel and pass through those waters. When they get on the other side, those waters are no longer the still waters being held back, congealed, literally, to where there's walls of water that of a canyon that they walk through. But when they get on the other side, it's chaos again. The Egyptians do not get the benefit of the protected waters, the protection of the waters or from the waters. They don't get that. The force field allows them to walk through, chase Israel down into the Red Sea, but then
The
chaos
chaos consumes them
comes in because there's no covenant.
because there's no covenant. It's a perfect picture. This verse right now, when you paint it as a picture of covenant and Sabbath, it puts a whole new picture on verse 2 and what this psalm actually means, or one of the meanings of this psalm, because there's such depth in the scripture. There's such depth. But here, if life is springing forth from the chaos because it's been changed and it becomes this womb that springs forth life, David's actually reminding us that Yah's covenant doesn't fail when we rest. If we're following him, rest is required because it's important for us, more so than we understand, for us physically, for us spiritually, even mentally, and we could go on and on and on from there. That's the reason we were created, and then that day of rest came. So David is reminding us Yah's word does not fail. His covenant does not fail that he has with us. We can be assured that life's not going to overwhelm us and we're not going to be attacked, because he's given us that picture. After the creation of man is Shabbat rest. David's probably reflecting on this at the same time, and as he takes the time to rest, reassuring himself and speaking forth that life, because he knows that rest is available to him no matter who is pursuing or what is happening all around him, because Yahweh empowers us to do the things we need to do today as we rest in him. The first thing he does is he takes us to this place of rest where we're satisfied. So we lie down, we rest because the chaos is under control, because we're secured by the covenant, and that has overcome the chaos. So rest beside the waters that have been calmed. Not because we took the day off. Sabbath is not about, I took the day off, so I'm good. That's not what it is. We are part of the covenant and we're resting in him. It's so much deeper. It only is going to apply to his sheep, though. You see people all the time, they'll read this psalm for their own comfort, but if they don't know him, the world understands this psalm. This rest is not available to them. If we don't understand Shabbat, that rest that we experience, we're not going to taste it or in its full. And if we don't know him at all, we may quote his words, but if we don't know him at all, we're not going to find any sort of rest. The chaos will be all around us, and it may be the only thing we know, and we'll name it something else. But it only applies, this psalm applies to his sheep. The sheep know his voice. And if I'm not allowing Yahweh to satisfy and take me to that place of rest, my life is just a fight to survive and try to overcome the chaos in my own strength. In my own strength. What happens when we do things in our own strength? Does it ever turn out well? No. It does not. We need his strength in all things. We need to follow his way if we're truly going to find that rest and find that life. And that's what we see here in this psalm. Sheep are confident when we follow him. We are confident in his promise that chaos has been removed and a life secured because of the covenant we have with him. So, Yenahaleni, which is Yenahaeleni, he leads me, okay, beside the waters, the calm, the still, he leads me. So beside waters, he leads me. Remember, that's the way it comes. That's the order it comes in the scripture. So your root here is nahal, Nahal, to lead with care. Who is the one that leads? Yahweh does. He's the one that's supposed to be leading our life. We say that he leads us, but oftentimes we put ourselves on the throne and we're the ones leading. We say, hey, Father, you can come back over here and lead when I'm through with this, or when I face this situation or this crisis. Once I figured this out, you are in control. But in reality, oftentimes we are the ones that have pushed him out of the way, and we are in control. The most important thing in this sentence that we need to understand is that chaos has been removed, just like in green pastures. They satisfy, then removes chaos so we can be led. What's important here is the results, because what is the result of resting? And who provides the rest? It's all results of what the shepherd does in our life. Okay, the word that I just gave you is spelled with a yod, a nun, a hey, a lamed, a nun, and a yod. It's a long word. And we just look at the simple meaning of each of those letters. I could go into much more depth with each letter that we are sharing here, but I'm going to give it to you just the simple one word meaning. Work, life, revealed, control, life, work. Okay, did y'all hear something in that? If you didn't write it down, I'm going to repeat it one more time. I want you to listen to what I'm saying and see if you hear something in this word. Yod, nun, hey, lamed, nun, yod. Work, life, revealed, control, life, work. Immediately something should jump out at you because we see a chiastic structure right there.
Mm-hmm.
Work and life on one end and life and work on the other end. So when you have that picture, why is Yahweh repeating himself? And isn't that poetry amazing? Because not only is David writing the words, or Yahweh writing the words through David, so he's writing these words that create this chiastic structure, but then even within the word itself, there's a chiastic structure because he's trying to tell us something. And that's what Hebrew poetry does. It doesn't rhyme. It's not a rhyming sort of poetry like we might understand in English. That's not what it is. But it gives these ideas that come together. Same idea is used in a chiastic structure, but different words. And Psalm 19 is probably one of the best Psalms for that. But David is showing us something here, because what he's showing us, it's about that control, the work and the deeds, the life, and then life in the deeds. We're following him, and then out of him, we begin to act and do what he calls us to do. So you bring life, and your deeds reflect mine. It starts off work, deeds, what? Work, life, revealed, control, life, work. So what we were doing before, once Yah's in control, now we do through him. And that's a really great picture, because everything that we do should be done through him, because he is our strength, and we do it unto him. We do it for his glory. So here we have this life that's brought forth because our deeds now reflect his deeds. Okay? Because he's brought everything under control. He's revealed it and brought it under control. So he leads us beside still waters, and the still waters remove the chaos from our life. And then what we do brings forth life because we act and look like him. When he leads us beside still waters and he removes that chaos from our life, it's someone like Exodus 34 verses 6-7. It says, and the Lord passed before him and proclaimed, the Lord God, merciful and gracious, long-suffering and abounding in goodness and truth, keeping mercy for thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgressions and sin, by no means clearing the guilty, visiting the iniquity on the fathers upon the children. But here we have, what are his deeds? It's mercy, it's long-suffering, it's grace, it's forgiveness, it's goodness, it's truth. Man, that sound like the gifts of the Spirit. But that's what happens. Those become our deeds because he's controlled the chaos and life is coming forth. And now we act and look like him. We act and look like him. So we are able to do what he does. And that's what Moses did in relationship. And that's what is revealed here in this paleo text. Behold, control. and it's framed by the life and the work and the deeds that he does. We're going to be going to part 2 of this, which is the Craig Report, and you don't want to miss that.